Berlin once split the world like a cracked tooth, but the ache settled inside men like me. They insisted the city was a chessboard. I discovered it was a confessional booth, wired with too many microphones. In '61, I crossed checkpoints wearing counterfeit smiles, swearing I'd defend ideals I barely understood. Somewhere between the Saxon beer and the coal-soaked fog, I traded certainty for survival. The mission that failed still knocks on my ribs each night, reminding me that loyalty can be a loaded gun pointed both ways. You wouldn't believe me if I told you how many allies wore the wrong flag under their coats. I'm not proud of what happened, but it had to be done. People think wars end with treaties. Truth is, one signature can bury more bodies than artillery. Maybe I was just a pawn to one finally willing to talk. If you're prepared to hear what the archives burned, lean closer. Before I regret any of this, hit like, subscribe if the discomfort suits you, and tell me where and when you're listening. Secrets need witnesses. Stay until the tape stops ticking. Because once the reels stop, so does my courage to keep. Confessing in this darkness. Morning always felt harmless in Norfolk. Seagulls, salt on the porch rail, bills sliding through the slot. I shuffled to the mailbox barefoot, rehearsing the aches I'd blame on old age. Junk flyers, pension notice, then an envelope the color of bone marrow unmarked except for 3. Punched holes where a postmark should be. My fingers knew the texture. Wax stationery meant to shrug off rain. The quiet cracked. I held it to the light. No return address, no stamp. A single piece of onion skin folded 3 times and sealed with starch. I opened it at the kitchen table where yesterday's coffee stains still mapped out Eastern Europe. The page was blank, except for 5 characters typed dead center. M42KP. Not words, but a skeleton key. In '61, that string would have opened supply caches under rubble near Zoo Station. Seeing it now felt like hearing my own eulogy, whispered by a stranger. Memory barged in uninvited Greta's cigarette ember floating in midnight fog. The clack of Soviet boots, the metallic cough of a cheap camera. I shoved those ghosts away and did what any addict does after years of sobriety. Searched for the stash. Beneath loose floorboards, right where I'd sworn never to look again, lay a cracked leather pocketbook. Inside, the old one-time pad, pages brittle as confession wafers. Trembling, I matched numbers to letters. Come alone, 48 hours, Cafe Kranzler. The code carried a second-line shorthand that wasn't ours back then. Trust no badge. It reeked of inside rot, the kind that eats organizations from the marrow out. Possibilities lined up like suspects. A prank by some smug historian. A loyalty test from Langley, or worse, Greta herself, alive and collecting debts. Paranoia tasted familiar, almost comforting, like a first drag after quitting. I paced the tiny kitchen, tracing grooves in linoleum that looked like artillery maps. 8 years of retirement had softened me, but routine remained weapon sharp. I checked angles through the blinds, replayed surveillance drills, let radio static mask my breathing. No black sedans, no glinting lenses, just kids biking to the pier and a mailman whistling off-key. The world hadn't noticed the tremor under my skin. That was mercy or design, I couldn't say. Decision arrived the way sunrise does, incremental, then blinding. I burned the letter over the sink, watched ash spiral down the drain like classified files shredded to slurry. Flames licked my fingers. I barely flinched. I booked a flight to Tegel, using a name that once belonged to a corpse with diplomatic immunity. The passport still smelled of mildew and official lies. My hands moved without hesitation, muscle memory overriding conscience. Somewhere deep, I'd hoped the past would stay buried. It had other plans. While packing, I slipped the pocketbook into my coat lining, next to the scar where a 9mm round tried to negotiate my resignation all those years ago. I stared at the mirror enough to count every betrayal etching. My face. The man looking back wasn't a hero, wasn't even sure he'd ever been a patriot. He was simply the last repository of a secret someone suddenly needed. Maybe I was disposable again, but pawns still occupy squares before they're swept aside. My cab to the airport arrived before dawn. As I locked the door, I glanced at the doormat, 3 small holes stabbed clean through the rubber, spaced exactly, like the marks on the envelope. Someone had been here first, feet careful, hands gloved. They wanted me to know they could walk in anytime, harvest whatever pieces of me they required. I swallowed the warning like bad whiskey and stepped into the dark. And that's when the air felt thinner, as if Berlin had stretched its shadow across the Atlantic to pull me home. Whatever waited at Café Kranzler was already tightening the noose. The letter had done its job. I was back in the game, whether or not the game still remembered my name. Morning fog at Tegel hugged the fuselage as wheels kissed concrete, and Berlin's gravity clenched my ribs again. Colder than the seatbelt I peeled away. 36 hours after the letter, I walked downstairs that rattled like the last time I evacuated an asset through Tempelhof. No fanfare, the rhythmic tap of my shoes, and a passport that belonged to a dead attach. The immigration booth smelled of printer ink. The officer barely looked up, stamping a name that felt like gravel on my tongue. He licked a thumb before flipping the passport back, as if tasting the dust of archives. His boredom was a kindness. Paranoia thrives on attention. Still, I watched the mirrored pane behind him, saw a man in a flat cap pretend to read a newspaper, and failed to turn a single page. The city was already talking to me in half-dash gestures, but I took the S-Bahn into the heart of the divide. New ads, same tension. Graffiti begged for freedom in 3 languages. Each station slide was a slide in a projector. Of 61, shouts, dogs, and the sudden smell of cordite outside Friedrichstraße. I kept breathing through it, counting seconds between memories to stay present. At Zoologischer Garten, I slipped into a public restroom, swapped coats, and flushed the disposable SIM that booked my flight. Old reflexes, quick and comforting. When I emerged, the man with the newspaper was gone, replaced by a woman adjusting a stroller handle that didn't match the wheels. Berlin had more eyes now, digital and unblinking. I trusted analog instincts instead. I walked the Kurfürstendamm toward the wall scar. Storefronts glittered like apologies for what the city once demanded. A pensioner fed pigeons beside a busker strangling a saxophone. Somewhere below, the old tunnel we dug for cable taps still flooded every winter. I pictured mud choking the wires, secrets dissolving into groundwater. Funny how infrastructure outlives intent. Near Potsdamer Platz, cranes stabbed the sky where guard towers had stood. I stopped at a memorial slab, pretended to read the inscription while scanning reflections in polished granite. A van idled too long at the curb. Its antenna twitched, a low growl tracing my steps. My rendezvous wasn't until dawn, but I needed proximity like an addict needs scent. I circled toward the wall's preserved strip, a concrete fossil wearing gum and graffiti as sediment. Tourists snapped selfies. I saw firing lanes. I traced bullet pockmarks with a gloved finger and felt pulse beats from the decade I'd left behind. Maybe history is just trauma we've agreed to photograph. Twilight bled over the Brandenburg Gate. I rented a bicycle to appear local, pedaled past embassies that changed flags but not ambitions. Halfway down Wilhelmstrasse, the front tire hissed flat, neatly punctured. Someone wanted me on foot and predictable. I left the bike leaning against a trash bin, pocketed the valve cap out of spite, and kept walking. The safe house waited on a side street in Nitt, above a bakery that closed at 6. The key was still taped under the third flower pot, where I'd taught Greta to hide it. That symmetry felt rehearsed, staged. Inside, dust covered the furniture, except for a chair by the window recently used, judging by the scrape marks on the floor. On the table lay a single Polaroid, me, today, exiting the airport. Fresh chemical sheen, timestamp already fading. I set the photo aflame over the kitchen sink, watched plastic curl and dribble black tears. Whoever staged it wanted to hurry me. I unpacked the pocketbook, spread the one-time pad, and listened to pipes groan like distant artillery. Outside, a siren wailed, then cut off mid-howl, as if someone pinched the city's throat. I lay on the dusty mattress, Beretta under the pillow, coat still on. Sleep crept in staccato breaths. Just before the dark closed, I pictured Greta's last smile, crack in stained glass, and wondered whether she'd recognize the ruin I'd become. The wall might have fallen, but some of us never made it to the other side. And that thought kept the room colder than Berlin's night air. Something was already moving in the halls, like film advancing to the next frame, waiting for me to open the door. On painted cant trays in diluted neon, each puddle repeating a broken semaphore only old spies still read. Kaf Krenzler kept its candy-striped awning, proud as a veteran's ribbon. I chose the terrace, back to brick, eyes on the spiral stairs Greta once called our watchtower. A waitress slid me coffee bitter enough to strip varnish memory's flavor. 10 minutes late, Greta surfaced from street haze, camel hair coat instead of camouflage. She stayed standing, umbrella dripping, weighing whether I was asset or hazard. "You traveled heavy," she murmured, eyes on the bulge where the one-time pad slept. Rain hissed softly on the awning overhead. She sat only when sure the horizon behaved. A sugar packet crossed the table, but heft betrayed it. Inside a contact lens case clinked 2 microdots, sealed in paraffin. "Carry this or bury it," she said, brushing my knuckles. Her skin felt like cooled brass. Greta's shrug was half apology, half indictment. I tilted a lens to terrace light. Microscopic text glittered like a confession afraid of daylight. Reactor blueprints? Agent rosters? Worth killing for, which meant worth framing me for. I pocketed the case, gravity doubling inside my coat. Greta crushed the sugar wrapper, tiny code for surveillance sweep. I scanned mirrored windows spotted. A stroller woman, adjusting a handle that didn't fit. Sane misfit from Tegel. Berlin was already spelling our eulogies. "Still dream in German?" Greta asked. The question cut deeper than any wiretap. "These days I try not to sleep," I answered. She nodded, exhaled smoke that shaped itself into the gate, then collapsed. "Extraction?" she pressed. I outlined a path. Canstrays to Savigniplitz. Drop to U-Bahn, ride U2, vanish. She traced the route with her finger, stopping where the line ran parallel to Bornholmer Strage. "Avoid that bridge," she warned. Orders changed? A bakery runner interrupted, delivering a warm paper bag. Inside, a pocket radio already humming. Static parted for a drawl. I knew Galloway, my handler, reported dead in 73. "Pawn to King 4, crackled the voice, and silence. Code once meant abort. Greta's cigarette trembled. Ash constellated the tabletop. "Ghosts giving commands," she muttered. My pulse hammered out a counter-cipher. "Run." Police sirens spilled blue over shop fronts. Tourists lifted phones. Shopkeepers lowered shutters. Berlin's reflex to unexplained tension. Greta rose, hand on my shoulder balancing us both, or pinning me down, unclear. "Langley scripts one ending," she said. "I propose another." In her pocket, I glimpsed a second lens, case redundancy or rivalry. I tossed cash on the saucer, grabbed the radio, followed her through the service corridor. Flour dust hung like classified snow. Stairs dropped us into an alley smelling of yeast and diesel. Glass shattered above, either bullet or staged distraction. We sprinted toward Savigniplitz. Commuters wielded umbrellas like riot shields. Microdots bumped my ribs, each knock a countdown. Guida's hand found mine, anchor or shackle. Passing a shop window, I caught our reflection. Two ghosts rehearsing an escape written years ago. Ahead, the stroller woman waited at the station entrance. Smile fixed, earpiece glinting. The board was set. Every piece already moved. Greta squeezed my fingers. "Choose your war," she whispered. Rain thickened, sluicing nicotine from the awning, turning streets into silver arteries. My shoes slipped, proof that time polishes even fear. Each block carried a different scent-roasted coffee, wet newsprint, cordite fossilized beneath cobblestones. Berlin layered noises like codes. Tram brakes screeching, a church bell in minor key, a child's laugh sliced short by a parent's hiss. Ordinary life kept marching, while violence rehearsed in back alleys. I wondered if the city would log our passing or simply archive the silence afterward. Far off, church bells rang the half hour, a reminder that time was still measurable, even when fate felt untimed. Behind us, wet footprints smeared into anonymous gray, already erasing motive and direction, as if the city itself preferred amnesia. History loves erasures and sells regrets. I realized Kaff Kranzler wasn't the rendezvous. It was the detonator. And whatever's ticking now, lens case, radio, or guilty heart will echo loudest when we reach that bridge she fears. Because some bridges demand a toll still. We ducked into the U-Bahn at Savigniplitz, shadows stretching ahead like warnings. The tunnel smelled like mold and forgotten directives. Our footsteps echoed too cleanly, no shuffle, no stutter. That meant we weren't alone. Greta stood close enough to whisper without lips moving. Left coat pocket, outer seam. I reached. In dot it was tiny, barely the width of my thumbnail, wrapped in wax paper like a breath mint for the damned. She kept her eyes forward, pretending we were strangers. "Don't examine it now," she muttered. "And don't trust anyone, not even Langley." The words didn't hit me like paranoia. They hit like memory. I'd heard that phrase before. 61, somewhere near Bahnhof Friedrichstraße. Different informant, same warning. That op had gone sideways too, and the man who warned me? He was found drowned in a canal with his lungs full. Of ink. We boarded the train. Greta slid into a seat beside a nun, who blinked just once before shifting slightly. A signal, or maybe just Berlin manners. I stood by the door, watching my own reflection blur and sharpen as we roared between stations. I didn't like carrying anything I hadn't vetted myself. But microfilm, that was old-school espionage. A dead format. Unless what it held was never meant to be digitized. I scanned the car. Two students talking too softly. A man with a violin case who hadn't blinked in 5 stops, and a conductor sipping from a thermos labeled Carl. Only the name was too crisp, like it hadn't aged with the rest of the bottle dot at Spittelmarkt. Greta gave me a look that said, "This is where you leave." I nodded, stepped off. Doors closed behind me like a vault ceiling. I exhaled only when I hit the street level. Rain traced old scars into the pavement. I ducked into an alley, back against brick, and opened the wax paper. Inside, a sliver of microfilm tightly rolled and fastened with a dot of amber glue. My stomach dropped. Stamped across one edge. Project Morgenlicht. That wasn't just intelligence. That was supposed to be mythology. Morgenlicht was the ghost file. Whisper said it housed contingency protocols, asset swaps, blackmail matrices, locations of burial sites. The kind of stuff that makes governments apologize decades later or deny until death. I didn't want it. Holding it felt like picking up someone else's loaded weapon. I needed verification, so I reached for my portable scope, a relic I swore I'd never use again. One glance was enough. Diagrams of reactors, surveillance overlays in Leipzig, even a name, Carter. That name wasn't German. It was American. The pieces clicked too fast. If Morgenlicht was real and Carter was embedded here, someone had unzipped the whole operation without clearance, which meant someone at Langley was burning both ends of the chessboard. I pocketed the film just as footsteps approached from the far end of the alley. Not rushed, not casual, measured, too quiet. I slipped through a side gate, navigating a courtyard that still bore Soviet murals. Half-faded faces saluting ghosts. My safe house wasn't far, but nothing felt safe anymore. The film was radioactive, metaphorically, if not literally. And Greta? Either she was trying to save me, or to see who'd come hunting once I had the package. A text buzzed on the burner phone. No sender, just coordinates and a time. 1:15? Location? Bornholmer Strage Bridge. Greta's warning rang loud in my head, echoing through the bones of this mission. Avoid that bridge. And just like that, the weight in my coat grew heavier than any pistol I ever carried. The microfilm wasn't just evidence. It was bait. And I was already in the trap again. Berlin's tunnels had always hummed with double meanings. Every train was a confession booth with no priest, just watchers. I boarded the U2 at Klosterstrasse, with the microfilm stitched inside the hem of my coat and paranoia crouching behind my ribs. 3 stops in, I felt it. Not saw, felt. The kind of awareness that blooms behind your ears, like someone memorizing your breathing. Across the car, a man in a slate gray gabardine read a folded newspaper upside down. Not a metaphor, actually upside down. Deliberate, like a dog baring its teeth before biting. He didn't look at me, not directly, but he kept adjusting the brim of his hat 5 taps, then pause. I'd used that code in 61 to signal readiness at an extraction point. Now it read like sarcasm. I gripped the pole and counted heartbeats. Trains surged. Stations blurred. At Wittenbergplatz, I switched. Cars. He did too. At Bülowstrasse I sat. So did he. Always 3 seats away, never closer. His timing was polished, too polished. Langley, Stasi, Mossad, it didn't matter. This was hunter behavior. I closed my eyes halfway, let motion blur my focus, and rehearsed passwords I hadn't said in decades. Cherry freeze, Dresden blue, postman cries twice. Each one tasted like rust and blood. Forgotten countersigns from dead networks. I whispered them beneath my breath like prayer. The train slowed. He didn't flinch. I caught a glimpse of his cuff-wrong stitching. Too low. Rental. Disposable. That meant he didn't care about being remembered. That made him dangerous. At Nolander Flats, I got off. Turned right, then abruptly cut left toward the connecting platform. He hesitated just long enough to confirm my suspicion. He was waiting for my move, not making his own. I ducked into a restroom I'd used as a dead drop 30 years ago. Nothing had changed. Chipped tiles, buzz of fluorescent doom, a metal dispenser that once held encoded pills. I didn't need the mirror to know he'd follow. I just needed the stall's door to stay shut long enough. Seconds later, Boots approached light. Deliberate, he wasn't rushing. I stood on the toilet lid, silent. Door creaked open, then stopped. His breathing filled the stall beside mine, shallow, steady, waiting for movement. I remembered a trick from Warsaw. I flushed, then threw my coat under the gap to the neighboring stall. He lunged, just as I bolted out barefoot, coatless, down the hallway and up the emergency stairs. I didn't look back. Not yet. Outside, rain hit my skin like penance. I doubled back toward the zoo station, bought a cheap umbrella, and moved into a crowd of tourists photographing nothing. Berlin is good at making you feel anonymous until you remember how many cameras are watching. I checked my coat. The microfilm was still stitched in thankfully. I hadn't worn the decoy. I slipped into a kebab shop to breathe and watch the street. 3 taxis passed. No tail. A man asked for spare change with a familiar accent. Not local dot that I saw. Him gray gabardine, soaked now, standing under a yellow awning. No newspaper, just staring at the entrance. He didn't come closer. He didn't need to. He was marking territory. A silent message. I'm not finished. I took the back exit through the kitchen. Grease cutting the scent of fear. I didn't run. Not yet. But something about his patience terrified me more than bullets ever had. This wasn't surveillance. It was theater. And I'd just been cast without knowing the script. I knew then that Bornholmer Stage wasn't a rendezvous. Pointed was a stage. And whoever waited in the wings already had a spotlight aimed at me. Cold air hit like a slap when I reached the bridge. Bornholmer Stage, where in '89 they'd cheer and kiss on concrete. But tonight, it was the kind of quiet that comes before a siren. No tourists, no guards, just the wet hiss of wind curling under floodlights. I walked slow, shoes echoing, louder than I liked. Greta had warned me about this place. Side orders changed. That usually meant one thing. Someone swapped the target. And tonight, I had no idea if that meant me. Halfway across the bridge, I saw him, backlit, hands in pockets, civilian clothes. No hat, but his posture tight, upright, textbook military. My stomach dropped before I even saw the face. Connor? I whispered. He turned, and it was him. Connor Reeves, my former trainee from the Frankfurt Post. Last time I saw him, he was green, eager, still asking permission to breathe. I'd taught him how to vanish in a crowd, how to plant evidence with gloves, how to say just enough to lie convincingly. Now he stood there like a man who didn't need to ask anything. You're off book, he said. His voice didn't wobble. Mine nearly did. So are you. He nodded, looked past me, not at me. You shouldn't have come. Wasn't my choice. I reached into my coat slowly. His hand didn't flinch, but his gaze did. Old instincts never really die, just get quiet. I'm not here to stop you, he said. But I was told if you showed up, I should let them know. Them? He didn't answer, but his earpiece buzzed faintly, and he turned his head just enough to listen. That's when I realized he wasn't armed. Or maybe he didn't need to be. I stepped closer. Connor, you know what's in the microfilm? No, but I know what they think is in it. That's not the same. No, we stood like statues in fog. Across the bridge, I saw movement, 2 silhouettes by the moon. Guard post, not in uniform, but carrying the weight of authorization. You could walk away, I offered. Forget I was ever here. He didn't blink. They said you might say that. And I remember what you did for me in Milan. I said nothing. He already knew the answer. He reached into his coat. For a second, I braced. But he pulled out a cigarette pack and slipped it into my hand. 5 minutes. I'll say I lost you in the fog. Still covering for your mentor? I asked. He smiled. A twitch, nothing more. Just repaying the favor. I turned, didn't run, didn't rush. Just walked into the mist like it was 1961 again. Inside the cigarette pack was a key card and a note, Span Locker 273. Tiergarten. Use once. He didn't follow. I didn't look back, but as I reached the far end of the bridge, I heard his voice in my head. I was told if you showed up, That meant they were expecting someone else. And maybe I'd just taken their place in the story. Something about that made the cold bite deeper. The bridge didn't feel like escape. It felt like inheritance. Tiergarten always smelled of damp, leaves, and resignation. I made my way under moonless sky, using the shadows of trees like old passwords. Locker 273 was tucked behind a vending machine near the zoo station entrance. Key slid in smooth. The compartment popped open with a sigh like even the metal was tired of this. Inside, a burner phone, a map with 3 routes marked in green, and a flash drive labeled simply Nell. That wasn't a code name I recognized, which meant either it was newer than me or older than anyone still alive. The phone buzzed before I even turned it on. Preloaded message, timestamped 30 minutes earlier. Carpe Noctem active. Lights out at 3 o'clock. Do not deviate. That was CIA protocol, mid-century, rarely used and never officially. Carpe Noctem Latin for seize the night was blackout drill slang. Radios off, no confirmation, no fallback. A trust exercise in a room full of knives. I moved fast. Took Route 2, the one that circled through Spreebogen. Low exposure. High exits. Fewer memories. The city looked different. Without light. As if it didn't want to be seen doing what it still does. I found the rendezvous marker under a bench near the Bismarck Memorial chalked initials. Then 3 scratches. Classic dead drop signal. I waited, silent, counting heartbeats against. Gunmetal wind. At 3:02, the park lights shut off in perfect unison. Then came the static, not from my burner. From the old shortwave Greta slipped into my coat lining. A whisper through it. Delay not ours. Stand by. The silence that followed felt like judgment. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. No contact. No extraction. Just the dark. Until I heard it. First, the sound of leaves disturbed without wind. Then the click of a radio handset being depressed 3 times. That was the signal. Except it was my signal. The one I'd used in Prague to initiate asset withdrawal. I called out. Cody name required. No answer. Just the click again. I drew my sidearm. The rusted Beretta felt too small in my hand. From behind a tree, a figure stepped out. Civilian. Clothes. Thin build. Hands raised. Don't shoot, he said. I'm just here to relay. Relay what? New orders. You're not extraction anymore. I didn't lower the weapon. Then what am I? He looked around, like even the trees might be listening. Insurance. They think greed is compromised. You're the control variable now. My jaw locked. Who sent you? Langley. He said, but he blinked as he said it. Too fast, eyes too wide. Not a field man. A messenger. And Nell? He hesitated. That's above my clearance. I stepped closer. Give me the full directive, now. He pulled a folded paper from his coat, trembling. I took it and backed away. In the dark, I unfolded it under moonlight. Typed, not printed. Signed, Directorate 4. It read, Asset Greta to be silenced. All data transferred to secondary handler. Nell contains her failsafe. Agent is to retrieve and deliver. No debrief. No trace. No signature. No confirmation code. But the language was unmistakably ours. The man started to say something else. But his head jerked. 1 shot. Silenced. Right between the eyes, I dove. Rolled behind a tree. Heard 1 more footstep, then silence. Whoever pulled the trigger didn't want me yet. I crawled to the messenger. Dead. Pockets empty. No ID. No backup orders. Just blood, hot and sticky, soaking the mission into my skin. Carpe Noctem wasn't the blackout protocol. It was a purge. I was inside it. The first shot had come from behind the hedge's southeast quadrant. Close range, clean. That was no warning, it was a signature. Whoever fired wanted me to know they were good enough to take me down if they'd wanted. That meant it wasn't a mistake. It was a message. I didn't run. Running gets you profiled. I moved slow, low, deliberate, looping around the pond near the Soviet memorial. Beretta drawn but low. The sky was still dark. No moon, just the amber haze of Berlin bleeding through distant street lamps. I crouched behind a stone plinth, heartbeat, syncing with my breath, the way they taught us back in Langley before Langley stopped teaching and started erasing. Then it came again. A short volley-controlled 3 bursts, suppressed. From somewhere near the train tracks, I recognized the rhythm. 14. Standard use issue, Cold War era. Outdated, unless someone wanted the signature to scream American. I listened. No shouts. No German police. That meant the entire operation was cloaked, unauthorized, shadow tier, or worse internal, a glint in the grass. I belly crawled and found the casing. 7.62 NATO, no factory stamp, black market batch, or Langley black bag. Either way, it narrowed the suspects to people with keys to my drawer. Then a crackle in my earpiece. Not the burner, not the shortwave. The old unit embedded behind the collar, one I hadn't used since the Budapest sting. It activated by proximity, not intent. Someone close had flipped the switch. Target unstable. Proceed with fallback. The voice was distorted, synthetic, but the cadence too familiar. Someone had sampled my handler's voice. Galloway, dead. Since '73. I froze. That wasn't just surveillance. That was psychological warfare. Someone out there was using me against me. That's when the flashlight beam skimmed the treetops. I ducked, rolled into the underbrush, and spotted the silhouette rifle. Drawn, scanning. He moved like a Marine, but stood like a bureaucrat. Field ready, but uncertain. Not a killer. Yet, I aimed. Then hesitated. He muttered. Visual not confirmed. Possible asset deviation. That confirmed it. I was the target, the asset. And I'd deviated. I fired once, not to kill, just to warn. It hit the lamppost behind him, sparked, hissed. He scrambled, dropped the rifle, ran, but then came the other shots. Not from him. From behind me, concrete shards exploded near my feet. I dove flat, Beretta out. 2 more shots. Again, 14s, 2 shooters. Triangulation. They were hurting me, not hunting. I pivoted hard, dashed toward the maintenance tunnel near. The victory column. Behind me, a bullet caught the edge of my coat, spun me, tore the pocket. I fell, skidded, slammed into a drain pipe. The microfilm. I reached for it, dash, gone, dot, no time. I crawled inside the tunnel, dragging breath behind me. And there in the dark, with the storm grumbling above and my ears still ringing, I finally got it. This wasn't a leak. It wasn't betrayal, Dot. It was protocol. Langley had triggered a sweep. Operation Carpe Noctem wasn't about recovery. It was about erasure. Of Greta. Of the files. Of me, Dot, and the worst part? I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised, Dot, just cold. Somewhere, between the last bullet and the first step through that tunnel, I realized the weight was gone. My coat fluttered lighter than it should have. No bulge. No pressure. No microfilm. I turned back, but the shots had stopped. No footsteps. Just the buzz of an overhead sodium lamp dying a slow death. The world had gone quiet again, the kind of quiet that means someone got what they came for. Dot, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sudden weight of absence. That film wasn't just intel, it was leverage, memory, proof. Now it was air. Gone. Gone. The tunnel reeked of copper and mildew. I checked every pocket, tore through the seams. Nothing. I traced my path in reverse, crawling like a wounded dog. Near the drainpipe, I found a scrap of the wax paper wrapping, wet and torn. Deliberate. Someone took it clean. No rush, no struggle, surgical. And that's when it hit me, Greta. She'd stood too close. Her coat brushed mine, just once. At the cafe, a gesture that felt human. But she'd been trained better than I ever admitted to Langley. Better than me, maybe. She must have taken it back. Before the U-Bahn. Before the bridge. Before Carpe Noctem. That wasn't betrayal. That was contingency. I sat in the grime for a long time, just letting that settle. If she had it, maybe she never planned to escape with me. Maybe she knew what was coming. Or maybe she wanted to bait the protocol herself, to see who would blink first. Footsteps. Hurried. Just two boots slapping water. I raised the Beretta. But the shape that entered wasn't military. A child, maybe 12, holding a plastic shopping bag like it weighed nothing. He stopped 10 feet away. "This is for you." I lowered the gun. "Who sent you?" He shrugged. "She said you'd know." The bag held a cassette tape. Handwritten label, KNELL. Final copy. I checked it. Standard magnetic reel. Probably voice. Maybe a message. Maybe a trap. The boy was already gone. I clutched the tape. My head was spinning now. If the microfilm was real, but this was the final copy, what had I been carrying? A decoy? A trigger? A distraction? Greta had played a longer game. She always did. I was the delivery system. Not for the film, but for the attention it drew. And someone took the bait. My knees ached as I stood. The drain. Tunnel opened up into the west side rail yard, where the tracks gleamed with rain and history. I limped forward, dragging silence behind me like a second coat. Somewhere out there, the original film was already being duplicated or destroyed. And I no longer cared which, because what I held in my hand now wasn't evidence. It was testimony. And if I knew Greta, it would be the last voice anyone ever expected to hear. But even that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing that she'd planned all this without me. The safe house in Schneeberg was one of those places the city forgot forth. Floor walk up above a locksmith. Same key since '58. It smelled like dust, old paper, and secrets that don't like to be remembered. I closed all the curtains, laid the Beretta on the table, locked the door twice. Then I pulled out the tape. No deck to play it on, just the battered dictaphone from my Budapest years, still hidden behind the baseboard. It whirred like it remembered who I used to be. Pressed play. Silence. Then, faint at first a breath. A chair creaking. Then a voice. Her voice. "I know you're listening," Greta said. Not a greeting. A diagnosis. "You never asked who I worked for. Only who I loved." Her tone was steady. No anger. No regret. Just the precision of someone who'd already played out every scenario before saying a word. "You think this is betrayal. But you taught me to think in threes. Mission, cover, exit. You forgot the fourth insurance." There was a pause. The sound of water dripping. A door groaning open. Then a second voice. Mine. From 30 years ago. "You're not walking out of here with that." Greta. On the tape, she laughed. Quiet, almost kind. "I'm not walking out at all." I felt the chill spread down my spine. This wasn't just a message. This was a confession. A recording of something I didn't remember or didn't want to remember. On the tape, I heard footsteps, a scuffle, a table knocked over. Then another voice, male, sharp, clipped, American. "Stand down, agent." Then static. Then Greta again. Closer this time. "If you're hearing this, it means I made sure you got the version they never archived." She exhaled. I could almost smell her cigarette smoke through the hiss. Tell me, did you ever figure out who signed the orders that night? I paused the tape. I didn't want the answer. I poured myself something dark and cheap. Sat down. Pressed play again. Greta continued. Do you still believe in countries? In missions? In badges that mean something? Another pause. Then her voice dropped. Because I stopped the night, I watched you follow an order that wasn't real. Just a voice on a wire, and you didn't even ask who it came from. Silence. Then, I forgave you. That's what makes this hard. The tape clicked, rewound itself. I didn't press play again. I just sat there, alone, in a room that suddenly felt smaller, because she wasn't accusing me. She was reminding me, and somewhere deep down, I already knew whatever happened in that room. I let it happen, and I never filed the report. The city didn't sleep that night, but it pretended to. Berlin has always been good at pretending. Pretending to be divided. Pretending to heal. Pretending not to see. I walked toward the Brandenburg Gate with the kind of slowness you learn in the field, when every step might be the last one they let you take. The cassette was in my inside pocket, still warm from the player, still whispering in my head. She'd said I followed a voice that wasn't real, and she was right. I'd followed a lot of voices back then. Galloway, Langley, even my own. None of them led to the truth. Tonight was different. The gate was empty, except for a figure standing just beneath the columns, where the wind doesn't reach. He wore a wool coat with a collar turned up and a scarf I recognized hers. I didn't draw my weapon. Didn't need to. He wasn't armed. You have it? He asked. His accent was hard to place. American education, East German vowels. Have a version of it. Good enough? He held out a slim envelope. I didn't take it. What's the deal? I asked. Freedom. For her. I laughed. Once, short and dry. There's no version of this where she walks free. You know that. He nodded. But there's a version where you disappear. Quietly, permanently. No trial. No press. I looked down at the cassette. And if I walk away? Then she dies in a basement nobody remembers. And the tape vanishes. I should have refused. Should have pulled the Beretta, shot him in the knee, and demanded a swap. That's what the agency trained us to do. That's what I did once. But this wasn't that kind of night. I handed him the tape. He handed me the envelope. Inside, a document, redacted. A signature I'd seen before, under missions that never made it to the archives. It was my name crossed out. Beneath it, status, decommissioned. I was being erased. I looked up. And Greta? He didn't answer. Just turned and walked into the fog. That's when I realized there was no guarantee. No proof, no witness, only me. Again, I stood under the columns a little longer, feeling the history pressed down like wet stone. I thought about burning the envelope, about going to the press, about vanishing into some warm country with bad coffee and no extradition treaties. I just stood there because the deal wasn't really for her freedom. God, it was for my silence. Silence is the one thing I've always delivered on time. The tape clicks as it starts recording. I watch the red light flicker in the corner of the room like a dying pulse. My fingers hover above the stop button. They always do. But I never press it. I'm not sure who this is for. Maybe no one. Maybe someone who finds this drawer after I'm gone, looking for pension documents or keys to a life I never actually lived. But if you're listening, if anyone, is just know, I didn't forget. I chose silence. Until now. The file they burned was titled Operation Echogate, but that wasn't the name that mattered. The name that mattered was hers. Greta. She knew the ending long before I caught up. That's the part I can't let go of. Not the lies, not the losses, Not even. The betrayal. It's that she understood what this really was. A machine that grinds down truth until even the gears forget why they turned. I was part of that machine. Maybe still am. They said we were preserving balance, democracy, the West, but all I saw were people erased in the name of strategy. I helped do the erasing. And now, when I close my eyes, it's not the dead I see, it's the ones who walked away. She gave me the option to vanish clean. No name, no file. And I took it. That's the part no one talks about, how easy it is to disappear when you've already let go of being real. So here's what's left. One last tape, one last voice, one man talking into a machine that might outlive him. I've locked the drawer. I've labeled it something boring. Insurance. If it ever sees daylight, they'll say I went mad, that I invented this to feel important again. Let them. But if you're still listening, you know better. The worst secrets don't get buried. They get filed. And some of us remember the drawer. I left the recorder running, didn't rewind, didn't label it, just slid it into the drawer and closed it soft, like tucking in something already dead. Then I turned off the light. Sat in the dark. No sirens, no knocks, no gunmetal shadows slipping under the door. Just silence. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel watched. I felt forgotten. But that's the thing, isn't it? Sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is the one nobody remembers. They'll build new walls, new stories. They'll say Berlin healed. But somewhere, buried beneath the noise and concrete, there's still that sound. The sound of a cassette spinning. Waiting. Before I shut up for good. Hit that subscribe button if this story left something ticking inside you. And drop a comment below. What did you know about this story before you heard it from me? Maybe you didn't single quotes teed, but now you do.